what elements need to be in your life if you are going to march when it would be easier to stay where you are and die. Every week on this show, I do my very best. Sometimes I do better than others. I do my best every week, even when I fall short, to give you, the listener, a perspective on how you can march, how you can move forward, how you can make progress, even when the obstacle in front of you, the trauma or trial, the difficulty behind you is so big that it would be easier to stay where you are and die. I've explained this many, many times, but that death is not always the physical kind. So often there are people who are living in that they're breathing and going to work and doing the things they're supposed to do, but spiritually and emotionally and relationally, they're dead. What does it mean to march? We talk about that every single episode. I do my best to give principles and perspectives and even some motivation. I bring guests on who can talk about what this looks like. But one of the areas we need to, from time to time, step back and re-examine is what the life of a person who can march when it would be easier to stay where you are and die, what that life looks like. What are the elements that are necessary when we look at an obstacle and we are able to overcome that obstacle? What do we need to have? What are the elements? I've talked about this in the past. In fact, I probably 2 years ago did a podcast on this. You can find an archive, I'm sure, of some of the same things I'm going to say today, but we need to revisit this. I believe it is possible for me to give the impression that when we talk about march or die, we're just talking about gritting our teeth and grabbing the edge of the chair if we need to and hanging on a little bit harder and making it happen. That's not at all what I'm talking about. There are times we need to have some grit. There are times we need to have some determination and get up and just do it. But that's not the essence of what it means to push forward in the face of difficulty. We're going to talk about a few of these elements today that I believe everyone needs to have if they're going to be able to push forward in the face of adversity. I want this to be a help to you on the March or Die show. Hello and welcome to the March or Die show today. Very glad to once again have you joining me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation in front of us. I hope that you had the opportunity to go back and listen to last week's podcast with my guest, Sheriff Chad Bianco. An incredible conversation. I loved so much about the conversation. I loved the fact that he was so transparent. People outside of our area, outside of Southern California, and particularly where I live here in Riverside County, may not understand his position. If you are in maybe a small community, a small town or something, you think about the sheriff. I don't know what your connection to that is, but here in Riverside County, Sheriff Bianco is a huge influence in the county, but he is a huge influence in our state. He has several thousand employees, a couple $100 million budget. He is extremely influential, very powerful from a political standpoint as the sheriff of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. And to be able to sit down with him and talk through what is resiliency, what does that look like? What does it mean to have faith? How does that operate? How does that function? I was so grateful to be able to have that conversation. And if you did not get a chance to listen to that, please go back later, check out that episode with Sheriff Chad Bianco. It was fantastic. Today, I want to jump into something that for me seems very foundational or very fundamental, but I know it's something that I need to revisit from time to time personally in my life. It is so easy to get outside of what we're doing and to get so busy with life and all the stuff that's going on in our lives. It becomes so busy that we get to a place where even though we know we should make good decisions and we should take deliberate steps, even though we understand that, we can become so busy and so overwhelmed at times where we are just hanging on and just pushing forward. And it's important when we find ourselves in those busy seasons of life, those overwhelming times of life, that we come back to the basics, that we get back to the fundamentals. I've talked about this a little bit on this show and other interviews and had these conversations before, but I train jujitsu with a lot of people, I guess, but primarily with my kids. And my kids have all grown up training jujitsu, and I've enjoyed being with them. I enjoy learning jujitsu. I've done it for a long time now, but it's been a great way for me to get to be with my kids, train with them. And it's been interesting. I have 2 older kids and then 2 teenage kids. So about 7 years difference between the top 2 and the bottom 2. So I've gone through this process of training jujitsu with my older kids when they were learning and they were coming through that. And now they're, particularly my older son is pretty advanced and is very capable. And then going through that again with my younger kids, and they're growing and learning. But watching this process take place as my kids have learned a new skill, and it goes from very fundamental, very basic, to more advanced. That's how learning takes place. But what's crazy is I've been training for a long time. My kids have been training for a long time. You can get so far down the road and then find yourself in a class where some fundamentals or basics are being taught. And it's one of those things where you go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. You forget about the fundamentals or the basics. If you're learning something like jujitsu, where there are literally hundreds of different techniques and things you can do, and you can grow and learn and get better, you have to revisit the fundamentals, because it is in understanding the fundamentals, not the basics in that they're so simple anyone should know them, but the building blocks, the foundation of everything else. You have to revisit that. You have to come back to that again and again, or you're going to get so far down the road, you forget why you're doing what you're doing. You forget what you're grounded to. You forget the purpose of it all. You're not seeing things clearly. And I want to bring us back today to some of those fundamental thoughts, what I'll call here fundamental elements for the person who's able to move forward. What are some elements you have to have in your life if you're going to move forward well? Let's just jump in. There's a lot I could say around that, but I'll just jump right into this. Again, if you have listened to every episode of this podcast, you've probably heard these before. I'm sure you have. But I want to revisit with revisit them with you. Sometimes my brain and my mouth don't operate at the same speed. So I could come back to that. All right. I want to revisit these principles, these elements with you, so that we can get back to the basics or the fundamentals. What's the first thing you need to press forward? Number 1, preparation. Preparation. And these are general principles to prepare. You need to be prepared by hanging on to some basic principles, some general principles. Now, next week's episode, I'm going to go over once again what I call the march or die principles, those 5 principles that I operate from, that I teach from, and that this show is built on. We're going to talk about those principles, but there needs to be preparation. Here's the crazy thing, right? And this is something I'm sure you can relate to. I absolutely can relate to. I feel like everything in my life is going pretty well, so I get away from doing the basics. What are the basics? The basics, things like spending time with my wife and kids, spending intentional time, where with my wife, it's going out on a date, or, spending time together, special time, set aside time, not talking about the family and not talking about work time, but time just for us. Things are going well. I begin to drift from that. I'm not as intentional about that. Time with my kids. Things are going well. I begin to drift from that. I'm not paying attention there like I should. This can happen in work. This can happen in your relationship with God, where you're very consistent in your Bible reading and your prayer and your fellowship with other Christians, and you're going to church, but you drift from that. And it takes sometimes a collision with a difficulty before you realize, wow, I've gotten away from that. It's easy for us to fall into this trap of thinking that goes something like this: I will do those things when I need to adjust. When I'm not having a great relationship with my wife and I are not doing well, I'll get back to spending time together and doing those things. When my kids are not doing well, I'll get back to investing in them. When spiritually I'm not doing well, relationally I'm not doing well, I'll get back to doing the fundamental things that I should do. Preparation is ongoing, as we used to say in the Marine Corps. You're always preparing. Everything you're doing in life is either engaging a target, engaging the enemy, or preparing to go into that conflict. In combat, it's that way. In the military, it's that way. In life, it is that way. What are you doing now to prepare for what will happen in the future? This is not about being paranoid. This is not about being afraid. This is not about being naive. It's not about any of that. You can have great peace in your life when you prepare. In fact, if you are prepared, peace will come into your life. There are a lot of people that believe the idea of preparation is something panicked or afraid people do. My experience has been that when I am prepared, when I'm investing in relationships, when I'm investing in my spiritual or faith life, when I'm investing financially, when I'm investing in preparation for a natural disaster in my community where I live, when I am prepared, when I'm working on preparation, I have peace. I don't prepare because I'm afraid. I prepare because I know that in life there are difficulties and trials, and those things come and they will. I want to prepare now so that I can effectively deal with them later. Now, again, there are some principles that we'll talk about next week, but I want to be prepared in order to march or die. In order to march, push forward, keep going, you need to be prepared. Outside of the principles that I'll talk about next week, I would encourage you, look at your life, prioritize your roles. My number one role, responsibility, my number one relationship, and those that fall under it. Prioritize your life, prioritize your roles, prioritize those relationships, and then ask yourself the question, what do I need to do to best be prepared in each one of these? To continue to build, to continue to grow. You need preparation in order to move forward. It is possible to recover after you've been smacked down and ended up on the ground. It is possible. Praise God. But what's better is having a plan in place that when the unknown difficulty, trial, or obstacle comes into our lives and it hits us, we've already decided before that obstacle, before that difficulty, before that trial, how we will respond. Preparation. That's number one. Number two, second element that you need to have in your life is perspective. I made these easy. They all start with P's. Again, I repeat these often. I give these often because they're so foundational. Be prepared. That's preparing for whatever's out there, right? Maybe you know specifically something's coming. Be prepared for that too. But when I talk about preparation, I'm talking about being prepared for the unknown difficulties of life. In those areas that you've outlined that are important to you, be prepared. All right? But the second thing is this, perspective. You need to have clarity of the situation that you now find yourself in. Here's what a lot of people do. They encounter a situation, a circumstance they did not expect. Maybe something happens with one of their kids. They didn't see it coming, but there it is. Happens in a relationship. Didn't see it coming, but here it is. A work situation, another situation. Something happens, and since we are emotional people, we're made with emotion, part of how God made us, and when hardship comes or difficulty comes, we so often want to relieve the pressure, take away the pain, deal with the thing and get past it. We don't pause long enough to get the right perspective, get clarity of the situation. When I tell the march or die story that I've told so many times, I'll often mention that an enemy is a person or place, a thing. An enemy is anything that would stand in the way of your forward movement. This is, again, it can be a person, it can be a place, it can be a thing. It's anything that would pop up in front of you and keep you from moving forward in whatever area of life is important to you. They become the enemy. But what I'll say with that is that not everyone who tells you to slow down, to think, who gives you advice, who says something contrary to what you think or how you feel, not everyone who would stand up in front of you is the enemy. In fact, a lot of those people want to warn you. They care about you. They're on your team, and they're just trying to help you as you move forward. We get this blue on blue. We kill the friendlies. We kill those who are working with us and for us when we don't recognize that there is an enemy and there are people who are trying to help us. The people who are trying to help us in those difficult times of our life give us clarity of the situation. They help to give us perspective. Before you take a bold step in the face of a difficulty, a trauma, or a trial, reach out, breathe, ask for a perspective from someone outside of your immediate situation. Allow them to speak into what you're doing so that you can get clarity. And then maybe they can help you formulate the plan to move forward. It's possible, please hear me out. It is possible to move forward. It's even possible to move in the right direction forward. It's possible to do all of that and to get to the other side and to do a lot of damage along the way. It's amazing how pragmatic people can be when it comes to some of these issues, where they'll say, yes, I had to run over a lot of people and hurt a lot of people along the way, but I got to where I needed to be. When it would have been possible to get to where you needed to be in a way that demonstrated some wisdom and perspective and helped rather than hurt people that you had to work with or go through or get past. There's a right way to do right, and often there is a wrong way to do right. Don't trust your instinct or your intuition or your emotion if you haven't taken a minute. Pray and ask God for direction, to ask for wisdom, as the Bible tells us He will give us in James chapter 1 and verse 5, to get wisdom in that multitude of counselors. The book of Proverbs tells us to get some people to speak into your life before you do something that you may later regret. You need to have preparation, elementally, fundamentally, preparation, prepare, but then get the right perspective. Here's the next thing. Number 3. So they all start with P, remember? This one, pursuit. Pursuit. It starts with a P. That's why it's pursuit. What is pursuit? Pursuit is the application of our training. I sometimes struggle with knowing what to do. I know what to do, but I don't want to do what I know to do because I understand how much effort will be involved. Can anyone connect with me on that? I say often it's hard to know what to do, and I struggle with knowing exactly what to do, and that is true much of the time. But what is also true is that it's possible to have prepared. It's possible to have learned. It's possible to have gotten the right perspective. It's possible to have all the tools you need to move forward. But then for one reason or another, because it would be too hard or take too long or you're already too tired, the pursuit, the application of the preparation, the application of the training, the application of the learning, and the application of the counsel, just overwhelming. You again decide you'd rather just stay where you are. One of the points that I like to make is that victory or success, it doesn't come to the perfect. It comes to the persistent. It's amazing how many people are not the most qualified people in life, yet they are the most successful in life because they take what they know, they take what they've learned, they take the preparation they've done, and in the best way they know how, they pursue. They push forward. They use what they have. Pursuit. Take what you know, take what you've learned, take what you've prepared, and then apply that to your situation. I know a lot of people who love to read books. They'll read books on leadership and business, all these other things, and they're terrible at leadership and business and all of these other things. But why? Because they enjoy the process of learning, but the process of applying is a lot more difficult. In order to move forward, in order to march, there must be preparation. There needs to be the right perspective, the application of that training, that pursuit, and then finally, perseverance. Perseverance. We are so interested in the quick answer that it's possible for us to do everything right with the right perspective, having done the right preparation and pursuing. But when the outcome doesn't come fast enough, throw in the towel and we walk away. In order to come out on the other side, there will need to be some perseverance. This is what character looks like. There's so much talk about character. What is character? I taught a lesson, and I'll teach it again, I'm sure, at some point, on the elements of character. We see those elements. I believe a great place they're outlined for us is in the book of 2 Peter, chapter 1, in the first 10 verses. It says, add to your faith. It gives a list of those characteristics that make us who we are and who we need to be. A character is what's on the inside. It's what makes us who we are. It's what causes us to think the way that we do. But we can build that character in. People of strong character are people who will do the right thing consistently without quitting. They're doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because of applause, not because of fame or recognition, not because of anything other than it's the right thing to do. Perseverance requires character. It requires that part of us that says, I'm going to continue moving forward and I'm going to do it as long as it takes. When you are willing to remove a time frame from the decision to do the right thing, that is when you will powerfully move forward. It's in that process. Again, the book of James, chapter 1, tells us that the trying of our faith works patience. Those difficulties that come into our life, they work patience. They create in us patience. There's a godliness that comes from that. There's an understanding of who God is and what he wants us to do. There is an increased faith when we are patient because we realize that what we have to hang on to is not our own intellect or will or skill. It's God. What a scary, difficult, and wonderful place to be. The place to be where we realize that what we have is confidence in God, who he is, and what he said he'll do. But that requires perseverance. We've all known people that have started so well. They've even won some battles. They've won some fights. But they've fallen short. They quit. We do the right thing. We march one faith-filled step at a time. We press forward. Not because of who's watching, not because of some arbitrary measure of success we're pursuing, but because God has a purpose, a plan, and a direction for our lives, and we want to move into that. Proverbs chapter 3, 5, and 6 talk to us about not leaning to our own understanding, but allowing God to guide our paths. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, running with patience the race set before us by following Jesus. The long race, it's a long process. And success, marching when it would be easier to stay where we are and die, will always require perseverance. I come back to these four fundamental elements because I need to be reminded of these four fundamental elements. I need to be reminded again and again to continue preparing, even when things are going well, because at some point there will be some challenges. How am I going to deal with those? Well, how prepared am I? I need the right perspective. Not the perspective, covered my face, so microphone. Not the perspective that I can only see what I'm seeing, what's right in front of me, but a perspective that is gained by reaching outside of my circle and asking others to speak in. I need the right perspective, clarity on the situation, pursuit. I'm going to apply the information, the preparation, the learning that has been done. I'm going to apply that in this situation. Then I'm going to persevere. Keep moving forward. The reality in our lives is that trials will come. They come to all of us. It's funny that people seem so surprised when trials and difficulties come into their lives. It's a lack of understanding the human condition, I think. We all want things to go well. I think we're all actually very optimistic. Most of us are. Things will go well forever. And once I get through difficulty, that'll be the last time. There's going to be another one. It's going to happen again. That's just part of life. The question is not, will difficulties come into your life? The question is, what will you do when the difficulties come into your life? Prepare now, because they're coming. Develop that circle of counselors and mentors and friends so they can speak into your life when you need that right perspective. Decide now, before you're exhausted and overwhelmed and faced with the trial, that you will apply what you've learned. You will pursue. Be the kind of person, a person of character, perseveres. I'm in it for the long. I'm in it as long as God has me here. I hope those are a help to you. Those are fundamental, foundational elements that need to be a part of your life if you are going to march. Because marching is a decision. It's like staying where you are and deciding to die is a decision. We're not the victims of our circumstance. We get to decide. The question always comes back to this: what are you going to do? Hope this is a helpful thought for you today, and we will next week go back to the 5 March or Die principles and talk through those as well. I've heard from so many people who have listened to this podcast. It's been very encouraging. I don't hear from the people who hate it, so I guess that's good. I'm sure there's some of them out there. But for those of you that appreciate it, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this content out. Really, really appreciate it. And I do hope it's helped you. And I love hearing from you. So thank you for that. Please take some time, go to Life Audio, lifeaudio.com. You can find some other great podcasts there. Very grateful for my relationship with Life Audio and all the good work that they do. Please go check those out. You'll be encouraged. I hope that will be a help to you. Again, thank you for watching and listening. I look forward to talking to you next.
Many of our veterans feel they need to fight their battles alone. This self-isolation has led to the staggering statistic of more than 20 veterans taking their lives every day. The mission of Mighty Oaks is to eradicate the veteran suicide epidemic and help our warriors change their legacies. We've been able to help over 4,000 veterans and first responders by equipping them with the tools they need to live the lives they were created to live. Our faith-based, peer-to-peer approach has one of the highest success rates of any program available today, offering hope and understanding to those who need it most. By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these men and women are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. It's your generosity that can make a difference in the lives of the men and women who have fought for our country and our freedoms. Now that they're home, don't let them fight alone. Learn more at mightyoaksprograms.org.